My 14-year-old told her teacher she was having a medical emergency and was denied the bathroom twice, then got threatened with disciplinary action for going anyway. She texted me from the school bathroom floor. Not sitting on the floor. Sitting against the wall next to the door with her back pressed to the tile because that was the closest she could get to the exit in case someone came in, which is what my daughter does when she is frightened and needs to feel like she can leave quickly. I know this about her the way mothers know specific things about specific children, the catalog of small behaviors that map to internal states that the child herself cannot always name. The text came in at 11:23 on a Tuesday and it said, "Mom, I need you to come." And then a second message, 30 seconds later, "I went anyway. She is going to write me up." I was in a work meeting. I read the messages under the table. I stood up and said I had a family emergency. I was out of the room before anyone responded. My daughter's name is Nadia. She is 14 and she is the kind of person who does not ask for things easily, who has inherited from me a specific reluctance to be a problem for other people, who will sit with discomfort for longer than she should before she says anything because the saying feels like an imposition. I know this about her and I have spent years trying to gently dismantle it, trying to teach her that her needs are not impositions, that asking is allowed, that the people whose job it is to care for her are supposed to care for her. She had sat in that classroom and asked twice. She had been told no twice. And then she had made the decision, at 14, alone, to go anyway. She had been right to go. That is the first thing I need to say, and I need to say it before I tell you everything that followed. She was right. Completely. Without qualification. I'm going to tell you about the teacher and the principal and the disciplinary referral and the 4 phone calls and the school board meeting and what happened at the end of it. But I am starting with that because the rest of it is easier to understand when you know that the beginning of it was a 14-year-old girl who did the right thing and was punished for it by the first LT who should have protected her. I drove to the school. 22 minutes. I have driven that route so many times it lives in my hands rather than my head, the turns happening before I consciously direct them, but those 22 minutes were different because I was reading the situation in real time and the reading was producing something in my chest that I have only felt a handful of times in my life. Not panic. Something colder than panic. The specific cold of a parent who understands that their child was failed by someone whose entire professional purpose was to not fail her. Nadia was in the front office when I arrived. Sitting in one of the plastic chairs along the wall, her backpack in her lap, her jacket on even though the office was warm. She had put the jacket on to cover the front of her clothes. I understood this immediately and the understanding added something to the cold thing in my chest. I sat down next to her. She looked at me and I saw in her face the specific expression of a 14-year-old who has been holding herself together for the last hour through the force of not wanting to fall apart in a public place. I put my arm around her. I said nothing for a moment because nothing was the right thing. Then I said, "Are you okay?" "Physically, yes," she said. In the careful way of someone who has separated the categories because the non-physical category requires more space than the front office allows. "Tell me exactly what happened." She told me. She was in her second period history class. 45 minutes into the period. She had raised her hand. Her teacher, whose name I will give you because she has earned having her name in this story, was Ms. Okafor. Nadia told Ms. Okafor that she needed to use the bathroom. Ms. Okafor said they were in the middle of a lesson and she could go at the passing period in 15 minutes. Nadia said she could not wait 15 minutes. Ms. Okafor said she needed to learn to manage her time better and should have gone between classes. Let me stay here for a moment. In the middle of that sentence. She needed to learn to manage her time better. Said to a 14-year-old girl about a biological process that does not operate on a schedule. Said by a woman. I'm sitting with that and I am asking you to sit with it too, the specific quality of that particular failure, and then I am going to tell you what happened next. Nadia waited 5 minutes. Then she raised her hand again. She said, and she told me she chose these exact words deliberately because she wanted to be clear enough that there was no room for misunderstanding, "Ms. Okafor, I'm having a menstrual emergency. I need to go to the bathroom right now." The classroom was not silent. It was a classroom of 30 students in second period and there was the ambient noise of a room full of teenagers doing the things teenagers do when a teacher is talking. But the students near Nadia heard her. She knew they heard her because she saw 2 of them look at her and look away with the specific speed of adolescents who have witnessed something uncomfortable and are removing themselves from the visibility of it. Ms. Okafor looked at her. And said, "You can go at the passing period. That is the rule." Nadia stood up. She picked up her backpack. She walked out of the classroom. Ms. Okafor called after her. Nadia kept walking. She went to the bathroom. She spent 11 minutes there. When she came out there was a student aide in the hallway who told her she needed to go to the front office. In the front office, The administrative assistant told her that Ms. Okafor had called down and that a disciplinary referral was being processed for leaving class without permission. Nadia sat in the plastic chair. She texted me. She waited. I finished listening to all of it sitting next to my daughter in the front office with my arm around her and her jacket pulled over the front of her clothes, and I felt the cold thing settle into something that was not going anywhere. "Did anyone ask if you were okay?" I said. "When you came to the office?" She looked at me. "They asked why I left class." "Did anyone ask if you were okay?" "No." I stood up. I went to the front desk. The administrative assistant was a woman named Deborah who I had spoken to 3 times over the years of Nadia's attendance and who had always been professional and occasionally kind. I told her I needed to speak to the principal. Deborah said the principal was in a meeting. I said I would wait. I waited 11 minutes. The same amount of time Nadia had spent in the bathroom. The principal's name is Mr. Halverson. He came out of his office with a specific expression of an administrator who has been pulled from something and is calibrating how serious the interruption is. He saw my face. He recalibrated. He invited me into his office. I asked if Nadia could come. He said of course. We sat down. He had a notepad. He looked at it and then at me, and I understood that he had been briefed by the administrative assistant and had the referral version of events already in his possession. Ms. Okafor filed a referral for, he started. "I know what she filed," I said. "I want to tell you what happened before the referral." He put the pen down. "Please." I told him. Everything Nadia had told me, in the sequence she had told it, without editorializing. The first request. The time management response. The second request with the specific words Nadia had used. The response to the second request. The decision to leave. Mr. Halverson listened. He was quiet through all of it. When I finished, he looked at Nadia. "Is that accurate?" he said. "Not challenging." "Confirming." "Yes," she said. He wrote something on the notepad. He said he needed to speak to Ms. Okafor before he could respond fully, which was reasonable and which I acknowledged was reasonable. He said the referral would be held pending that conversation. He asked Nadia if she wanted to go home for the day. She looked at me. "Yes," I said. "For her. Because she should not have had to make that decision herself." We went home. Nadia showered and changed, and I made her food, and she sat at the kitchen table and ate it, and I sat across from her and I watched her decompress from the thing she had been holding for the last 2 hours, and I did not fill the silence because the silence needed to be there. At some point she said, "I knew I was going to get in trouble when I stood up." "I know," I said. "I stood up anyway." "I know." Was that right? Not asking for reassurance. Asking the actual question, in the way she asks things when she wants the honest answer rather than the comfortable one. "Yes," I said. "Completely right." She looked at her food for a moment. She made me say the word in front of the whole class. I looked at her. "She knew what I meant the first time," Nadia said. "The second time I had to say it louder and the whole class heard. And she still said no. And I walked out and everyone saw that too." She paused. "I'm going to have to go back to that class." The sentence hit me in a specific way. Not the administrative facts of what had happened. The daily reality of what happened after. The going back. The 30 students. The 2 who had looked away. The walking back in and sitting down and being 14 in a room where something had happened that should not have happened and that could not be unhappened. I called the school at 3 that afternoon. Mr. Halverson had spoken to Ms. Okafor. His update was careful and administrative and told me, between the careful administrative lines, that the conversation had not gone the way I needed it to go. He said Ms. Okafor maintained that the school's bathroom policy required students to wait for passing periods except in documented medical emergencies. I asked what constituted a documented medical emergency. He said a note from a parent or physician on file. I asked whether a student verbally stating she was having a menstrual emergency to her teacher was not sufficient documentation in the moment. He said the policy was designed to prevent disruption. I said the policy was being applied in a way that caused a 14-year-old girl to bleed through her clothing in a classroom, and I needed him to hear the full consequence of that sentence. There was a silence on the line. "The referral is being withdrawn," he said. "I want to be clear about that." "I appreciate that," I said. "I also need you to understand that the withdrawal of the referral is the minimum of what I expect from this situation, and we are not finished." Another silence. "What else do you need?" "I need a meeting," I said. "With you, with Ms. Okafor, and with the district's Title IX coordinator. I need that meeting to happen this week." He said he would look into the coordinator's availability. I said I needed a confirmed time by end of day tomorrow. He said he understood. I got off the phone and I sat in my kitchen and I thought about Nadia going back to second period history and what that required of her and what it should not require of her and what I was going to do to make sure the return was as protected as I could make it. What I did not know yet was that what had happened to Nadia had happened before. Not to her. To others. And that the pattern was documented in a place I had not looked yet but was about to. The meeting happened on Thursday. 2 days after the bathroom. I know parents who would have gone in with the energy of someone burning something down, and I want to be honest that the energy I brought was not that. It was colder and more deliberate than that. Fire moves fast and burns visible and allows people to position themselves as reasonable in contrast. What I brought to that Thursday meeting did not allow for contrast. I brought documentation. The night before the meeting, I had done something I had not done in 4 years of Nadia attending that school. I had gone to the district's parent portal and read the full student handbook. All of it. The bathroom policy specifically. The Title IX policy. The health services section. The grievance procedures. I had read them the way you read something when you are looking for the gap between what the document says and what was done, and I had found the gap in 4 places, and I had written all 4 of them down on a single piece of paper in my handwriting, not typed, handwritten, because handwritten things in meetings communicate that you have been sitting with something long enough to write it slowly. I also called 2 other parents. This is the part I want to tell you carefully because it matters to what happened after. I had a friend whose daughter was a junior at the same school. I called her the night of the incident, not to vent but to ask a specific question. Had her daughter or anyone she knew experienced something similar with the bathroom policy? She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Actually yes," and gave me a name. I called that name. That name gave me 2 more names. By Thursday morning I had spoken to 4 parents whose daughters had been denied bathroom access during the previous academic year, and one of whom had a written complaint she had filed with the front office that had been acknowledged and not acted upon. I brought copies of that complaint to the Thursday meeting. Mr. Halverson sat at the head of the table. Ms. Okafor sat to his left. She was in her early 40s and she had the expression of someone who has been told a meeting is happening and has prepared a position. The district's Title IX coordinator, whose name was Ms. Reyes, sat across from me. She had driven from the district office and she had a folder and a legal pad and the specific alertness of someone who understood that her presence had been requested and that the requesting had meaning. Mr. Halverson opened the meeting by summarizing the incident. He was accurate and fair in the summary, including the withdrawal of the referral, and I noted the accuracy before I said anything. Then he turned to Ms. Okafor and said she was welcome to provide her perspective. Ms. Okafor said she had 30 students in that classroom and that the bathroom policy existed to manage disruption, and that she had not understood the severity of Nadia's situation from the way it was communicated, and that she regretted the outcome. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "My daughter used the words menstrual emergency in a room of 30 students. She said those words to you directly. I want to understand what communication would have been more clear." Ms. Okafor looked at the table. "I did not realize." "She told you she could not wait," I said. "She told you it was a medical situation. She used a specific word that described exactly what was happening. At what point does the severity become communicated clearly enough?" Ms. Reyes was writing on her legal pad. "I made a judgment call," Ms. Okafor said. "I was in the middle of a lesson. Your judgment call resulted in a 14-year-old girl bleeding through her clothing and sitting in the school's front office in her jacket covering herself while a disciplinary referral was being processed against her for having the correct instinct to protect herself." The room was quiet. I put the piece of handwritten paper on the table. I walked through the 4 gaps between the student handbook and what had happened. The health services section stated explicitly that students reporting active medical symptoms were to be accommodated immediately. The word immediately was in the document. I had the page number. The Title IX policy included menstrual health as a protected health need under the school's non-discrimination framework. The grievance procedure stated that patterns of policy misapplication were subject to review. Then I put the copy of the other parent's complaint on the table. Ms. Reyes picked it up. She read it. She looked at Mr. Halverson. "This was filed 8 months ago," she said. "Not to me. To him." He looked at the document. Something moved across his face. "I was not aware this had been forwarded to the front office." "It was filed with the front office," I said. "The parent has her receipt." Another silence. This one different from the others. The specific quality of a room in which accountability has located the correct address. Ms. Okafor said nothing. She was looking at the copy of the complaint with the expression of someone who has understood that the meeting has shifted into territory that is no longer about one incident. Ms. Reyes said she would need to open a formal review of the policy application. She said it directly and she wrote something on her legal pad and underlined it. She said she would be in contact with both Mr. Halverson and the parents involved within 5 business days. Mr. Halverson said he was committed to addressing the policy clarity issue at the staff level and that he would be scheduling a professional development session on health-related student accommodations before the end of the month. Ms. Okafor said she was sorry. She said it in the meeting, directly, looking at the table rather than at me, and the not looking told me the apology was real even if it was not yet complete. Real apologies are often addressed to the floor. The performed ones look you in the eye. I said I would be sending a formal written account of the incident to the district office for their records regardless of the outcome of the review. Not as a threat. As a statement of what I was going to do. There is a difference and I wanted the room to know which one it was. Ms. Reyes said that was my right and that the district would receive it. The meeting lasted 51 minutes. I drove home and I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes before I went inside. Not because I was emotional. Because the adrenaline of a thing you have been preparing for requires somewhere to go when the thing is finished. Nadia was home. She had gone back to school the day before, Wednesday, and she had walked back into second period history with the specific courage of a 14-year-old who had decided that the classroom was going to be normal again because she was going to make it normal. She had told me this Wednesday morning before she left, "I'm not going to let it be weird. I'm going to walk in and sit down and it is going to be fine." I had looked at her and felt the specific combination of pride and grief that arrives when your child is braver than they should have to be. She asked me how the meeting went. I told her. Not all of it. The parts that were hers to know. The referral was formally withdrawn and documented, the policy was being reviewed at the district level, the school was making changes. She was quiet for a moment. Did she apologize? Nadia said. Yes, I said. In the meeting. To you. I looked at her. Yes. She nodded. Processing. Not to me. Not yet, I said. Do you think she will? I thought about the expression on Ms. Okafor's face when she said she was sorry. The floor looking. The reality of someone who had understood, in a room with documentation and a Title IX coordinator, the full shape of what she had done. I think she is going to have to sit with what happened for a while first. And I think that sitting is real. Nadia considered this. That is fair, she said. In the voice of someone being more generous than they need to be. Which is, I have learned, her natural inclination when she has had time to process something. She is not a person who needs the last word. She is a person who needs the truth named and then she is willing to move. Ms. Okafor did come to Nadia. Not the next day. The following week. She asked Nadia to stay after class for a moment and she apologized directly and specifically. She named what she had done wrong, not the general wrong but the specific one, that Nadia had communicated clearly and that Ms. Okafor had chosen the policy over the person in front of her and that was a mistake she was responsible for. Nadia told me about it that evening. She said Ms. Okafor had looked like someone who had been thinking about it for a long time and was relieved to finally say it out loud. Did it help? I said. Yes, she said. Not because it undoes it. Because she knows she was wrong and she said so and now I do not have to sit in that class wondering if she knows. The district review concluded 3 weeks later. The bathroom policy was revised. The new language included explicit accommodation for health-related requests, and removed the teacher discretion clause that had allowed Ms. Okafor's judgment call to happen within technical compliance. The revision was communicated to all staff in writing. 2 other students' incidents from the previous year were formally acknowledged in the review summary. I sent my written account to the district office as I had said I would. Not because I expected further action. Because the record needed to exist. Because the next parent who needs to walk into a meeting at that school deserves to walk in knowing the history is documented. I have spoken to all 4 of the parents I called before the meeting. 2 of them submitted their own accounts to the district. One of them is now on the school's parent advisory committee specifically because of this. She told me she had been angry for 8 months and had not known where to put the anger and now she knew. Nadia is in second period history 4 days a week. She gets up and uses the bathroom when she needs to and she does not ask permission because the new policy does not require her to ask permission for health-related needs. She does not make a production of it. She stands up, she goes, she comes back. The 30 students in the room have adjusted to this in the way of teenagers who adjust to things when the things become normal, which is quickly and without ceremony. She told me recently, without preamble, while we were making dinner, I think standing up that day was the right thing. I know it was, I said. I mean for after, she said. Not just for me. For the policy. For the other students. She was quiet for a moment. I did not know it was going to matter for other people when I stood up. I just knew I had to go. I looked at her across the kitchen. At 14 years old being clear-eyed about what her moment of terrified self-preservation had produced in the weeks after. At the specific quality of a person who stood up in a classroom when they should not have had to stand up and who was now doing what people do when they have moved through something hard and honest, making meaning from it without forcing the meaning, letting it be what it is. That is how most things that matter happen, I said. Someone just knew they had to go. She smiled. The specific smile of a teenager receiving something from a parent that lands correctly. Rare enough that I notice it every time. Here is what I want to say to every parent who has received a text from a school bathroom. Document everything from the first moment. Write down times and exact words and the names of everyone in the room. Not because you are planning a war. Because accuracy is the only tool that cannot be dismissed. Find the other parents. They exist. The experience your child had in isolation is almost never isolated. The pattern is usually there, and the pattern is what produces change rather than the individual incident. Read the handbook. All of it. The gap between what the policy says and what was done is where accountability lies. Go into the meeting cold. Not angry. Cold. Coldness is precise and precision is what the meeting requires. And tell your child they were right. Before the meeting. After the meeting. Whenever you need to. Tell them that their body is not an inconvenience to be managed on a lesson plan schedule. That their needs do not require a classroom's permission. That the AD-LT who told them otherwise was wrong and that the wrongness was the AD-LT's failure and not theirs. Tell them until they believe it. Because they are going to spend years in rooms where people try to convince them that their needs are disruptions. They need to already know the answer to that. Before they ever have to stand up.